welcome back to another beautiful yet steamy day here in Peacefulburg Gardens. We're actually not in Peacefulburg Gardens this morning. We are at Folly Farm doing some work, but I wanted to take an opportunity to talk about palms. And most people call them palm trees, but palms are actually not true trees. Palms are a monocot, so they're actually more closely related to grasses and corn. So monocots, compared to dicots, they have a single cotyledon in their seed. So dicots have two. So if you've ever tried to grow grasses or corn, you know that they have this one little single shoot that comes out of their seed, hence monocot. And they're very fibrous in nature. Their trunks, palms, their trunks are very fibrous, as well as their root systems. So they put out these super fibrous root systems that travel horizontally so that they can uptake the most amount of water and nutrients very efficiently. This is a very lovely, active place, so you might hear people talking and stuff going on in the neighborhood, so I just want to let you know that. And the bullfrogs were singing this morning because they're mating, and also there are little bluebirds in the boxes, little baby bluebirds. Every time the mama comes, they create quite a ruckus. And also we saw last week a hummingbird female that's been frequenting the gardens here, so it's quite lovely. Behind me here is a gorgeous, what people call cabbage palm. It's a sable palmetto. It's actually our state tree. And the reason I wanted to talk about this particular family of plants, Ericaceae, or old school palmae family, is because they flower and they fruit this time of year. Now, at Peacefulburg Gardens, I didn't have the space for a true sable palmetto. So we have sable minors, and we also have Serenoa repens, or the saw palmettos. I have two ecotypes. I have the blue saw palmetto and the green saw palmettos because I just couldn't help myself. So as I drive around this summer, and they do produce in the summertime, you see lots of flowers, on palm trees in the summertime. As I drive around, I notice that there are landscape companies chopping off their fronds and their flowers. Now, if you stumbled across this particular video because you saw the word palm in the description, I want to let you know that this channel is all about the wildlife, my friends. So we're all about healthy plants, creating healthy ecosystems in our own spaces for wildlife. And by doing that, by creating healthy ecosystems, by planting the right plants, they're just inherently beautiful all in and of themselves. But we don't focus on aesthetics on this channel. So if that's your jam, and that's all good, stick around. You might learn something new or not, but I just wanted to let you know that you're not going to necessarily find tips on how to make them look real pretty, because to us, they're just gorgeous naturally as they are. So what I notice when I drive around is that they butcher them, or they do what they call hurricane pruning, which is really silly, because by cutting off a lot of the browning or yellow fronds, as well as I've seen a lot of them remove the green fronds, you're actually weakening the plant, you're weakening the tree, because they only have so much surface area for photosynthesis, which is vital for the plant to be able to thrive. They need photosynthetic, energy they need the energy from the sun. They take that and they turn it into food and sugars, so that the plant can thrive. So when you remove even the brown or the yellowing ones, they actually continue to store some of their nutrients in the browning fronds, what we call a palm beard. I love that. They're called palm beards when you see, the brown hanging off of the palm tree. So they actually store nutrients much longer than other plants or trees do. And either the cicadas or the katydids are singing quite loudly up above me. Oh, I just love Florida. So by cutting off those yellowing or browning fronds, you are actually weakening your tree, not strengthening it. So you're making it weaker in storms. You're not creating a stronger tree by any means by making it more aerodynamic, I guess is what I heard. That's not the case. Again, by cutting off all of those excess fronds, you're taking away the plant's ability to cool itself. Those fronds actually shade the trees during intense weather, like extreme heat, like we're having right now. We have had many heat advisories over this particular summer. And also in the wintertime, if we were to get a cold snap or something along those lines, those fronds can actually protect that portion of the tree. The other thing that I notice is that they provide habitat for different frogs, for other species, for bats actually. Bats will use palm beards to perch in during the daytime. So you're destroying habitat for our wildlife. And with habitat loss and urbanization, they just don't have as much as they should. So we can protect their habitats simply by being smart about how we're taking care of our palms. Now, the other thing that I've noticed is that people have a tendency to cut off their flowers. And yes, they absolutely do flower. If I can point to this lovely kind of growth coming out of the center, that's a flower. And it's towards the end of its life. And I'll post a picture of what a beautiful inflorescence from a palm looks like. So they produce an inflorescence, which is just a grouping of a bunch of tiny little flowers. They're quite gorgeous. I find them to be incredibly beautiful. They support an abundance of insects and pollinators like moths, beetles, not just bees, and moths. They provide nutrients and pollen and nectar for a host of insects. So by cutting that off, you're taking away from native pollinators who rely on those flowers. And then, the rest of the story if you've been following this channel, those flowers turn into berries. They turn into fruit that other wildlife like birds absolutely rely on, especially through the fall and winter time when other things may not be producing fruit. So they flower in the summertime, and then as fall, summer, fall, winter progresses, that turns into fruit that they can therefore take advantage of. And we're going to go back to Peaceful Bird Gardens because my little palm, my little sable minor, put out a flower this year. I was so excited. There's green fruit, hopefully, still on the panicle. So I'll hopefully take you back there and show you that in a moment. But we're really doing ourselves a disservice, and rain is coming. I'm so excited. We're really doing ourselves and the wildlife a disservice by removing those flowers and fruit. And even if it's a non-native palm, which most of the palms that you see throughout Florida, unfortunately, are non-native and introduced species. They were brought in as landscape plants because people wanted a more tropical look. And we actually have, I want to say about 12 species of native palms here in Florida. And I will do a future video on native palms and highlight each one. You can, maybe see if perhaps you can introduce a native palm in your landscape to help support, and protect those species, because most of them are threatened and endangered because, people just aren't planting them. So even if you have a non-native palm in your garden or in your yard, allow them to flower and fruit, because the same thing applies. They still provide nectar sources for pollinators, and also there are certain species of birds that will take advantage of the fruit that they provide. Again, we want to support our urban wildlife as much as we possibly can, because unfortunately they're simply losing their homes due to urbanization and increased development. That, my friends, is Dani's spiel on palms and why we really need to protect them. If you want to prune your palms, I highly recommend that you wait until those fronds are truly dead. And also do it perhaps in the winter time. Plan your pruning more wisely. Landscape companies, and I'm sorry to say, I don't mean this about every landscape company that's out there, but in my experience, there are many commercial landscape companies. They know, maintenance, but they don't know plants. They simply don't understand the life cycle of plants and how they affect and are in relationship to other wildlife. Everything is interconnected, my sweet friends. So if you're going to prune, try to not prune above, say, like 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock. Allow them to have as much photosynthetic surface area as you possibly can, and that will absolutely extend the life of your tree, make them much more healthy and robust, and they won't, die sooner than they should. They won't get that kind of wonky bottleneck effect that we see a lot of palms get. So, all right, my sweet friends, Mother Nature is telling me that it is time. Sweet friends, so as promised, we are back at Peacefulburg Gardens, and we are in the front native section, and I'm sitting right in between actually my sable minors. So this is probably, I don't know, 3, maybe 4 years old at this point, and I want to say I have 3 or 4 sable minors planted in the native section. And one of the reasons why I really love this plant is because they put out these filaments. And this is actually an excellent way to identify sable minors, is because they put out these filament strings. Birds actually use these to build for nesting material. I've seen swallows' nests, barn swallow nests that were made from this, little swifts, and cardinals, mockingbirds. They also the threshers in our garden. So they use these to, for nesting material. So they're excellent for wildlife for that purpose. And also, as the palms grow, as in the cabbage palm, as the trunk grows, the boot jacks, as they call them, and I'll show you a picture of what I'm talking about. There's all this fibrous material that grows along, that comes out of those boot jacks. And again, birds and other wildlife will actually use that as bedding material and as nesting material. So it's very important that we are planting these particular species because they are excellent for our wildlife. And another way that you can identify some of our native palms on the saw palm meadows, Serenoa repens, if you run your finger along the petiole, it's serrated. Now be careful because they're pokey, but that's a way that you can tell that it is a saw palm meadow. Now, as I mentioned, I was very excited because I was over here working in the garden earlier in the summer, and I happened to notice that she had put out a flower, and she's quite young. So I was very excited to see a flower, and now she is loaded with all of this fruit. This is not edible. You will not enjoy eating this whatsoever. But the cabbage palm, the heart of the cabbage palm is absolutely edible. But the problem with that is that once you harvest that heart of palm, the plant dies. It won't survive that. So while they are edible, I do not recommend that you harvest heart of palm except from your own, landscape. Do not harvest it from the wild because you're killing, native plants, and we're losing them in the wild. So that would not be a great thing to do. But yeah, this is a fantastic plant to add to your native landscape. They create lovely, different feel in the landscape. If you like kind of an architectural or that sort of a look, you can put in some beautiful dwarf sable palms, or you can put sable minors, or you can put in some gorgeous saw palm meadows. And I will show you some pictures of saw palm meadows as well, because I have, as I mentioned, multiples of those also. All All right, my sweet friends, thank you so much for joining me this morning. If you're interested in this kind of content, growing native plants to support wildlife, or growing your own food, come on the journey with us. Give us a like, hit subscribe, and we hope to see you again on another steamy Peaceful Bird Gardens. Have a lovely morning.